This is The High Road with author and registered psychotherapist, Dr. Marlene Bizub. Dr. Marlene speaks to the heart of people who need to be lifted up and get out of the muck and mire that often accompanies major life changes, such as divorce or separation. Dr. Marlene will aspire to help parents of divorce to love their children more than they hate their ex, and to learn to take the high road. So please welcome the host of The High Road, Dr. Marlene.
Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. Hi, George.
Hi, Dr. Marlene. Great to be with you again, and good morning in our time zone anyway.
Yes, too early, actually. um, so I'm going to jump right in. I was at a conference on Friday, and it was entitled something like One Size Does Not Fit All, talking about the wide variety of issues that we see in parenting plans and families. And well, let's put that in the other order. The wide variety we see in families' needs, and therefore the wide variety of parenting plans that we see. And it really is true. One size does not fit all. You know, back in the day, and now I'm dating myself, but back in the day, we had every other weekend, usually for dad. And they lived primarily with mom or one parent. Sometimes it was dad, but usually mom. And then dad had every other weekend. Well, then we made this shift, huge shift, to week on, week off, or some type of 50-50. It might not be week on, week off, but some type of equal parenting time. Now we are finding exactly what the conference was titled, that one size does not fit all. You can't say every family is going to be 50-50 because the circumstances just don't warrant it. And so we have to be very individualized in our approach to parenting plans, schedules, and not just schedules, but like the things you include in the plan, even things like phone calls. Like some families can do phone calls, some really can't because of schedules and things like that. Like it's not practical. So I'm going to stop there and let you comment just on that so far.
Well, in the bad old days, it was called visitation.
Right.
And many times I had to tell a client, you don't visit, you parent your child. And so I think that's real progress that's been made there. Um, the next thing I would think about as far as parenting plans are concerned, sometimes, unfortunately, the best situation we can get to with fighting parents is a very specific, very boundaries oriented parenting plan. And that's the best we're going to do with some parents. And it's unfortunate as opposed to a cooperative or a collaborative type of approach to parenting or co parenting.
Yes. And we call that, what you're talking about that isn't collaborative parenting, co-parenting, we call parallel parenting, which, like you said, has very specific and very firm boundaries in place. And I have to tell you, when I see this happen, it just breaks my heart for the child, because you've got one parent who can't come to a game or a practice, and usually they'll make a provision in the plan that they can. But if you have like a restraining order and parents have to be a certain distance from each other, I actually had on one of my cases, and I know the mom often listens to our show, so I don't know if she'll hear this. And she was not the parent who did this, but one of the parents went into the classroom and measured how far it was from one wall to the other wall to see to see if they could both be in the classroom without violating the restraining order or no contact order or whatever they had. Now, that's ridiculous. And that breaks my heart for the child, that they have to know that their parent is in their classroom at school measuring to make sure the parents don't come in too close proximity with each other to violate a restraining order.
No, but unfortunately, something that I found to be generally applicable is that the more parents fight, the more they're going to fight.
Yep.
And they will find ways to fight, to irritate, to push the buttons of the other parent. Then that's what they get back. And they try to, what I call, play between the commas of a parenting plan. And it's very sad. I would imagine, and I guess one of the things that you'll teach us about today is the impact on children of their parents litigating over them.
Yes. Yes. In fact, let's just get into that right now. Okay. I told in this same case we're talking about earlier this week, we had a settlement conference. I was on the call nearly 7 hours, and then I had to get off to go see clients. And so I don't know how long the attorneys, and in this case, we have a CLR, a child's legal representative, on the case. I don't know how long they stayed on, but I know I was on for 5 minutes short of 7 hours. Okay. And I told the parents, when you put down the other parent, when you litigate, when you do any of that stuff, your child is internalizing that. You're not just putting down the parent, you're putting down the child, because the child doesn't have an identity of their own, depending on their age. But this child is 8. At 8, he does not have a solid self identity. He derives his identity from both of the parents. So when the parents are fighting, when they're at odds, when one's putting the other down, he internalizes that. And even if he doesn't hear anything real negative, if nobody's putting the other one down, he still knows they're fighting. And he internalizes that stuff like, if they can't get along, if they're bad people, I must be bad. I must not be able to get along with people. That's how kids really do internalize that stuff. And parents do not realize it. Like they have no clue that that legitimately exists. But you and I have seen it.
I would think that for children, they know, first of all, that their parents are fighting over them. The
Yes.
parents can't hide that from them. And I would speculate that it would make a child very insecure about themselves, as opposed to
Yeah.
parents who take the high road where the child feels like he or she has permission, hopefully the expectation in word and deed, that the child has permission to love the other parent.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. And parents just don't realize what we're talking about. I mean, they really don't. If they did, they wouldn't act the way they act. And I've shared this with you before, and I think I've shared it on here before, that I have had kids tell me, I just wish we wouldn't have even been born because it seems like all the fights have to do with us. And I look at pictures of my parents before we were born, like their wedding pictures and things like that, and they were so happy. And then we came along and now they fight. And that's tragic. Your child should, and like you said, it makes them feel very insecure, very often guilty, like they have somehow caused this. And I tell kids, there is nothing you could do to cause your parents to fight and cause them to separate and divorce. Nothing. That's between the adults. But try telling a kid that. because they really do think it's about them. They have egocentric thinking. And so they think everything has to do with them. And
Well,
so, yeah, go ahead.
I think this is more in your lane than mine, but I have seen and spoken with many adults who really have to learn that the behavior of their parents that was negative was due to their parents' inadequacies and not their own. And it
Yeah.
takes some people well into adulthood to really learn that and internalize it and feel good about it.
Yes, it does. I mean, kids just, they don't have adult brains and they can't process this stuff. Just like the story I tell a lot about the two boys that were 8 and 10 and were outside playing ball one afternoon after school, and one hit a baseball and broke a window in the house. And the next day, dad happened to leave. Well, those boys thought for years that dad left because they broke the window. That had nothing to do with dad leaving, nothing. And for years, because they can't process like adults, they don't have an adult brain. Their frontal lobe is not developed yet. And so they don't see things like we do. And George, some adults don't get that. They don't get it.
Well, I think that what I have seen is clients are sometimes so caught up in their own anger and
Mhm.
hurt that they really neglect investing in their children with a more collaborative approach to their co-parenting. And that's really, there's not a lot I can do about that except to try to say the more you fight, the more you're going to fight. And
Right.
that won't necessarily end at the final order or trial ruling of the court. You'll find a way to fight if that's your intention.
Yeah.
And rather than fighting, you would be better off to spend that energy investing in your children by taking the high road and trying to collaborate as to your parenting.
Yes. Yes. And I'll tell you something else that comes into play here. So, something I do with all the parents I work with is I have them go over the handouts for the level 2 co-parenting class with me individually. I don't make them take the class. I don't make them go over this information together because I want them to talk freely. But I go over the handouts with both parents, and people will resist. They'll say, "Oh, we've been co-parenting for 3 years. I know how to co-parent." And I'm like, "No, you don't. You don't know what the rules are. You don't know what the expected behaviors are, and you're not doing it well, or I wouldn't be here." And so and so first of all, they resist educating themselves. They don't wanna think and admit that they don't know how to co-parent. So that's first of all. Second of all, because I'll tell you what happens is once they take that class, they say, "Wow, I wish I would have learned this stuff a long time ago. I had no idea." And I have yet to have a parent tell me that it was a total waste of their time. They end up having to admit that they didn't know this stuff and that it would have been helpful to know it. So getting them to take it, first of all, is the first challenge. But then they will still somehow justify that their situation is different. And I tell them, I have not yet seen a different situation. They might have different aspects, different details, but they're all the same. You're failing to follow what we ask you to do, and therefore you don't have a good co-parenting relationship. Because, like you said, they just can't put the anger or resentment or whatever they're feeling behind them and focus on the child.
Well, it time helps, I think,
Yes, yes,
uh, and with some counseling and advisement. we try to turn the tide away from litigation to a more collaborative approach to resolving the parenting plan, even if parents have to fight about money. If they can
Mhm.
compartmentalize and not fight about their children, and keep the fight restricted to finances, that's a baby step in the right direction, probably.
Yes. No, I'm glad you brought that up actually, because and what we call it for those who don't know, and now I'm in your lane, so if I say anything wrong, correct me. But we do what we call bifurcate the hearing and only hear financial and property issues and reserve the child issues, the parenting time issues for later. And I can't tell you how crucial that can be. And some parents say, I just want to get it over with. I want to do it all right now. Well, you're not ready. We're not there yet. We don't know how things are going to kind of shake out here. So let's give it time. And they don't want to. They just, I don't know what that's about.
Um, yes, and going through the courtroom track is probably going to take at least 6 months.
Yes.
So, as far as expedience is concerned, that's not going to happen. The court schedule really doesn't permit it, except in cases of emergency, and they have to be genuinely emergent circumstances where the child is subject to physical endangerment or significant emotional impairment. Short of the endangerment standard being met, it's going to take typically 2 or 3 months to get a hearing date.
Hmm.
And that's
Yeah.
for a hearing. That's not necessarily for the final trial in the case.
Right. Right. And people don't realize how long it takes. And then I have people, because I had this happen the other day. I had a parent say they can't agree on the school for the child. And the parent said, if we have to, we'll just file an emergency motion. I don't know that that's going to be an emergency to the court.
I would think not.
Right.
The courts expect a certain level of maturity and behavior from parents, which is not always met. but
Right. Right.
but the court will carry that expectation into the case that the parents behave reasonably, that they behave with each other reasonably, and squabbling about being late for a pickup or an exchange, or even if that happens several times, that's not going to be considered an emergency by the court.
No, no. And deciding the school when one parent wants to change it and the other doesn't is not going to be an emergency either. Leave them where they are. There's a status quo involved here. And the parent who wants to make the change is at a disadvantage. And that's the parent who said, well, we'll just have an emergency hearing. Well, no, I doubt you will, because I don't think the court's going to, there's no emergency. The child doesn't have to change schools right now, and so that's not an emergency. And parents don't realize that either. They hear this terminology like emergency hearing, and they think anytime they need, they can get an emergency hearing. And they don't realize they are actually few and far between the number that are granted.
Yeah, absolutely true. And they don't understand the standard of endangerment. It hasn't been defined for them. And when it
Right,
is, sometimes they're more frustrated by that, but they have to get realistic about it.
right. Because in Colorado, for it to be an emergency, for an emergency hearing to be granted, there has to be endangerment. And so, and we can talk more about that when we come back, because I have a lot to say about endangerment. But I think I'll hold it until after break, because we need to take a quick break here, and it's a longer discussion than the 10 seconds that I have. But we'll be back in a minute. This is Dr. Marlene and George and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to easysense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's easysense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. Before we went to break, we're talking about emergency hearings, which require an issue of endangerment. And George, one of my pet peeves, and is something you taught me years ago, is what constitutes endangerment. Because people will often think, as you have said before, that bad parenting, and I tell it to people all the time, that bad parenting is not necessarily endangerment. And I have seen even what I would call really bad parenting and have the court, and they'll even acknowledge it as such. The judge will often say, that's bad parenting. In fact, that's really bad parenting. But it does not rise to the level of endangerment. And so you're the attorney here. I'm going to let you kind of explain what constitutes endangerment.
Well, the endangerment in this context is defined as physical harm or significant emotional impairment. And so we look for those things, and oftentimes I had to get on a level with a client and say, do you believe that your ex would harm your child or children? And I'd get a no. And I'd say, well, then we can work with that and move forward from there. But we have to keep that in mind, that if you may hate your ex, but you don't believe your ex is going to harm your child, and so there's not going to be any endangerment there. And so if we put it on that level, I think sometimes people understand it more easily. If you believe your ex is literally going to do harm to your child, and I'd get a no, and then could move forward from there.
Yes. Well, and there also is an element, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I may be wrong about this. There's an element of it has to have happened. Like, you can't say, I'm afraid the other parent will hurt my child. You have to prove that they have hurt your child. Is that not correct?
Yes, and that the one who's claiming that has the burden of proof. So they have to prove to the court's satisfaction to a reasonable level that harm is actually occurring or has occurred.
Mhm.
But more often or not, the claim is that it's ongoing.
Yes, yes. And I get parents who, they just can't prove the things they're saying, and especially when it comes to emotional harm. That is a hard thing to prove. I mean, is a lot of what parents do harmful or damaging? Yes, but can you say that it's actually causing like irreparable harm to the child mentally and emotionally? Well, that's a hard thing to prove. Would you agree?
Absolutely. It's a high
Yeah.
standard, a high level or burden of proof, we would say. And it is tragic, really, when one parent makes that accusation and it's unfounded, because it
Yes.
really ramps up the anger, the frustration, and the desire for vengeance. Sometimes, quite frankly.
Yes. Yes. Parents do weaponize their children. We see it all the time that they weaponize them, they use them as pawns. And, people hear us say this, but it really is true. There are parents out there, and I don't know that sometimes they even knowingly realize they're doing that, but it is what they're doing. And I'm going to shift just for a minute to kids who resist contact with a parent, because these are really difficult cases. And at our conference the other day, we were talking about, one of the presenters was talking about kids who resist are typically, I mean, once in a while you'll get a kid who's just oppositional and wants what they want, but typically they're not just being difficult. There's usually some reason, some element of truth to what they're saying about the parent that makes them not want to spend time with that parent. And that takes a while. My other point, or my takeaway message here, is it takes time to sift through that and get to the bottom of it and figure out what it was that this parent has done that has caused this child to feel this way. And I would say more times than not, it is not simply the other parent, because, parents always want to blame it on the other parent. Oh, he or she is alienating our child from me. Well, first of all, usually it's not just that. Second of all, is she or he really alienating, or are they a protective parent? There's a difference between being a protective parent and alienating. And our statute, even a few years ago, changed to say that a protective parent's actions will not be held against them, or something to that effect.
Yeah, I think parents want to be protective, and one of the things that I would see that's tragic, returning for a minute to the endangerment situation, was the parent thought they would prove the endangerment by simply calling the child to testify.
Right. And that's not going to happen.
Not going to happen. Highly destructive. Really, really unfortunate, and someone needs to educate that parent uh, desperately about how they would meet that burden of proof, and how calling the child to testify about the issues is not an option.
No, it's not. And so then, and now I'm going to shift into your lane again, but now we have a child hearsay issue, correct?
Yes, but again, we need the child deserves that voice. But
Mm.
the best way for presentation of that voice is, I think, a mental health professional to come
Yes,
on and provide the voice for the child. The child, as I say, deserves a voice, but not a seat at the table.
correct, correct. And that's a good segue into, I really believe, we talked a week or two ago, I forgot exactly when it was, about the different mental health professional roles I think that was 2 weeks ago. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of a team. And so, for example, the 7-hour settlement conference that I was in on Monday, there's a CLR, the attorneys, and me. And we have to work as a team. And there are other sometimes therapists or other professionals working with one or both, sometimes parents or the children. Like they might all have their own therapist, but we have to work together as a team. You often will see somebody's therapist kind of acting as an advocate for that party, whether it's one of the parents, a child, but they will act as an advocate. And that's not helpful either. That's almost like having a second attorney, if you will, representing that party. And I mean, we just can't have somebody coming in merely advocating for their client because they've got to see the whole picture. And that's why we have to all work together, compare notes, collaborate. What's your thought?
Well, I think it's critical because if in a not atypical situation, a client comes in and lays out what they want.
Mhm.
And what they want is unreasonable and unrealistic. And so we have to educate them, counsel them, advise them as to what's realistic, as to what is healthful for their child, because they feel oftentimes when I would see a client very justified in
Mhm.
their anger, frustration, and if they had their way, we would go back to those bad old days of every other weekend and a Wednesday dinner visit. Uh, so, but people, I think, understand that attorneys are gladiators for their
Mhm.
clients' desires. And so we have to start by shaping those desires so that the client doesn't give us an unreasonable directive as to how to go forward in the case. And typically that can only happen when the client receives some direction, some counseling, some advisement, some education about what is likely what they can expect if they go to court and what the repercussions of that are. And so it's a different paradigm for the attorney to educate the client first and then move forward with realistic expectations.
Yes, yes. Because often they'll want one parent or the other or both will want to limit the other parent's access to the child, participation in things having to do with the child, whether it's school, extracurricular, sports, whatever it may be. And you just don't usually get to do that.
No, but if that's the instruction from our client,
Mhm,
because the client has the right to define the goals for the representation,
mhm.
then we are obligated to seek what they have defined as what they want for the outcome of the case. And it's particularly frustrating to me when an opposing party says, "Well, whatever my attorney wants, that's fine with me," because
Right.
what my attorney wants is what I have told them they need to want. And
Yes, yes. Well, and like you said, they're the ones driving the case or should be. And
uh,
so
they they are, and we're legally obligated to
mhm,
seek what the client defines as their goals for the representation.
yeah,
So if the client comes in with unreasonable expectations, very hostile expectations toward the other parent as far as parenting is concerned, uh, our first responsibility, I guess, or hurdle to clear is educating the client.
mhm, mhm,
And we have to do that gently so that the client doesn't feel, well, you're not on my side, you're not listening to me, you don't care about what I want. So we have a
right,
delicate balance there in terms of educating the client as to what's realistic and what's healthy for their children, and letting the client feel that we really are on their side and we are willing to fight for them.
Yes. Well, and I would think it would be helpful to you to have somebody like myself who can go over the handouts from the co-parenting class and educate the client so that they don't perceive like you're not the bad guy telling them, here's the rules. It's me being the bad guy. And I think that helps you in being able to represent them and not ruin the rapport you have with the client.
Yeah, that's critical. And my best friend would be a neutral mental health professional. And
Mhm.
I think there's what we might call um, sampling bias. So if you have a mental health professional who is that one client's counselor or therapist, then they may not be neutral despite the
Right.
fact that they're a mental health professional and so forth. So we need a neutral mental health professional on the case in one of
Yeah.
those capacities that you taught us about.
Yes. And that's a very good point because that would be a conflict of interest. I, as a mental health professional, would not take a case where I had already been one parent's therapist. That wouldn't be appropriate. But you see people try to do it, and it amazes me that they don't get grieved more often. Or maybe they do, and I don't know about it. That
Yeah,
could be what's happening too.
it is, and I had a case once where there was a mental health professional on the case who was so gender biased. The
Oh,
judge even commented on it and said, "Yes, I think Doctor So and So did evidence gender bias here, and so on and so forth." So um, lawyers and mental health professionals have to be very careful and very sterile in their boundaries and
mhm.
the roles that they play so that they do not run afoul of some sort of bias or sampling error, whatever we call it.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I'll bring up just because it came to mind as you're talking, and that is I have parents who want everything they tell me kept private, kept confidential, but they want me to share what the other parent has said. And it doesn't work that way. When I'm a neutral, I'm either sharing with both or sharing with neither. But it's not like I'll tell you what they said, but yeah, if you don't want me to tell them that you said this, then I won't. And it just doesn't work that way. And you'd be surprised how much I get that.
Actually, I probably wouldn't be surprised.
No, no. And they also expect us to somehow take their side, or they fear we're taking the other's side. And this is not, at least where I'm concerned, this is not about sides. This is about your child. And I'll tell you the same about what I think, whether it's in favor of your line of thinking or opposed.
Well, and it's difficult because we see clients who genuinely, sincerely, adamantly believe that what they want is by definition best for their child.
Yes.
And so to move them off of that position takes some finesse.
Yes. Don't they often say to you, I've heard you say this before, that they'll say in regard to the judge, no reasonable person would think that I am wrong. Don't they say that
Ab-
sometimes to you?
Absolutely. The judge is certainly going to see it my way. And so I want to get in front of the court. And
Yeah.
boy, is that expectation shattered often.
Yes. Yes. And it's funny how many times things go exactly the way we tell the client they're going to go, and they're shocked. And it's like, I tried to tell you it's not going
Yes.
to go this way. Yeah.
And I've
And they
done this
just,
before.
right, right. And in front of this judge.
Absolutely. No
Yeah.
substitute for experience.
No, no, that's right. All right, time for another quick break, but we'll be back. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. You know, it feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. I want to make sure that I get this in before we end the show today, George. So I'm going to shift to this. But I want to go back to what we said at the top of the hour about one size does not fit all with parenting plans. And like I said, we went from this shift to, or from every other weekend for one parent to 50-50 in all cases, and neither of those is appropriate all the time. And I believe that's why every time it has come up in our legislature to have a presumption of 50-50 in divorce cases, 50-50 parenting time, it always loses. It always gets shot down. And that's because that is not appropriate. You get parents who don't get along well, aren't in close proximity to one another or to the places like the school, or they aren't available. I get that a lot. Parents who travel for work and aren't available, but they think the kids should be at their house. And so they'll have someone else, a friend or a relative or a neighbor or someone like that, watch them until they get home, which is often at bedtime. Well, no, your kids don't want to spend roughly half of their lives with this basically stranger. And it's not appropriate if the other parent is available. Now, leaving your kids with somebody occasionally is fine, and the other parent has no control over that. But if I was the parent who knew that 75% of the time that you're with your other parent, you're not with them, but with someone else, I'm probably going to object. And I'm probably going to win that argument too, I believe. And so it just makes sense to look at your individual situation, figure out what's realistic, and most importantly, what's best for the child and what they want. Ask them, would you rather be with mom or dad than Aunt Susie if I can't be here? Most likely they'll say yes. And if not, then we have a whole different problem to address. But would you agree we can't have a cookie cutter parenting plan?
No, and one problem we have, there's a tension in the law between stability and maintaining the status quo and adjusting or modifying a parenting plan to suit the changing needs of the child or children as they age or so forth. Their circumstances change, and
Mhm.
so uh, it it is a subject for discussion as to whether or not modification or adjustment of the parenting time allocations should be easier or not.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes. And you've got to look at that not only family by to family, each family individually, but as you said, the changing needs of the child as they grow. Because what we do for a 3-year-old is not the same as what we do for a 14-year-old. And so either writing those changes into the plan up front or anticipating that you will occasionally modify the plan is best practice, I think.
Well, the court never loses jurisdiction over those issues. So if the parents can't agree on an adjustment or a modification, then they're probably headed back to court, which
Yes.
is unfortunate, but that's the way it goes.
Mhm.
Um, we really, I don't know of a good way off the top of my head, which is a good area to stay away from, but I don't know really the resolution when we enter a parenting plan, even a very good, well thought out parenting plan, very reasoned, and we have young children, say 3 and 5 years old, uh, that's going to last and be serviceable for the rest of their childhood. But that's how we approach it. So it's a little bit
Mhm.
archaic and a little bit inflexible there. So we need to work on that and flesh that out somehow.
Yes. Yes. And I mean, what I do is just tell parents you can anticipate that it's going to change because your child's needs are going to change. And you get those parents who just say, I don't want to take this back to court. I don't want to go back to court ever, which that's good, but then figure it out. They can figure it out up front and write a progressive plan. But to say, I don't want to address it with them ever again. I want to be done with him or her from now on. That's not going to happen. You're going to deal with this person for the rest of your child's life.
Well, and it really doesn't make sense if we stop and think about it that a parenting plan which is serviceable for, say, a 3 and 5 year old is going to be serviceable throughout their youth and teenage years and later teenage years. That's not realistic. So we need to decide how to approach a modification that's appropriate, age appropriate and maturity appropriate for the child or children concerned.
Yes, yes. And all families are different because I get those parents who say, but my friend's parenting plan is such and such. Well, for that child, that might work great. That's not going to work for your child. I know your child, and that's not going to work. And some parents just don't get it. I truly believe there's a lot of parents out there who want a cookie cutter approach. Just decide how it's going to be and leave it alone. And we can't do that because everyone's situation is different. Your kids' needs are going to change, and that's going to be different from child to child and family to family. So it'd be nice if life worked
Well,
that way. It doesn't.
we understand that people are angry, hurt,
Mhm.
vindictive, and so forth, and it really takes a great deal of courage and selflessness to prioritize the healthful raising of the child.
Mhm.
And And so parents are to be applauded, I think, when they take the high road and invest in the development of their children through collaborative co-parenting.
Hmm. Yes. Yes. I would totally agree. And some think that they just aren't going to have to collaborate anymore or in any way communicate with that parent. And it's like, I don't know how you can do that. I don't know how you can share a child and have no contact. And it might be through the apps that we have. Some parents probably shouldn't talk, at least for a while, but, directly talk, especially in front of the children. But to think that you just aren't going to have to communicate, like, I want my time and I want them to leave me alone. Well, good luck with that, because there's there's going to be things on each parent's time that the other parent is going to get to participate in. Things at school, like I mentioned earlier, and extracurricular things and all of that. And so let's be realistic here and not, I'm sure you would love it to never have to look at, speak to, communicate with that other person again. But that's not realistic.
No, and again, just a brief writing when you do come to an agreement, whether it be a text or an email or something like that, that memorializes what the arrangement is very helpful, because memories fade and people's understanding and perceptions they differ. So we encourage people to have just a little writing that confirms what their agreement is.
Yes, and I have learned that over the years. That's something that I have gained, knowledge I've gained from the attorneys like you in my life, that you got to get it in writing, because you are right. You're not going to remember next year what agreement you made this year. It's not going to happen.
And so that little writing, that little memorandum is very helpful. And it's
Yeah.
really just an extension of saying to the parents, have you consulted your parenting plan?
Right. Let's start there. And then again, I'm going to make one more plug for having mental health professionals who know the court system involved in your case.
Well, and you've paid your dues and have years of experience, and there's no substitute for that.
That's true. That is true. I'm not going to argue that with you. Well, we are out of time, but thank you so much, George, for being here.
My pleasure. Always a pleasure to be with you, Dr. Marlene.
All right. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you've been watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll see you next week.
Tune in to The High Road with host Dr. Marlene and gain insight into how to rise above tough circumstances and learn the skills that will help you take the high road in your life, no matter what challenges might come your way, on the next episode of The High Road.